A 17-year-old boy confessed to murder of his father, but at that point, he was unaware that his father was his kidnapper, and he had been missing for the past 11 years. He seemingly escaped this home prison and brought down a criminal without even knowing the truth. With all this information being found about this family, was this murder in self-defense? Should this boy really have been charged with second-degree murder? You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, and today's case is actually based on the new Netflix documentary called I Just Killed My Dad, and it's a 3-part series that questions the innocence of a boy who had confessed to murder and was charged with murder, but was involved in a missing persons case for most of his life. This documentary has so much information, and before then, there was not really much information on this case. I'm very excited that it came out. I really recommend it, and I'm happy that I'm able to share this case with you today and really bring you a case that makes you question a lot of things. I also want to thank our beloved sponsor, HelloFresh, who allows me to take care of my body even with a busy schedule. And we all have busy schedules, whether it's motherhood, whether it's work, whether it's just mental health makes it seem like it's a busy schedule, or mental health makes it hard to do the small things. You all know HelloFresh is healthy meals, delicious meals delivered to your door, ready for you to make stress-free. My whole family uses it, and we have seriously never had a meal from there that we didn't enjoy. Whether you need vegetarian, calorie-free, or family-friendly, I don't know about you, but I cannot stand how long it takes to make grocery lists, go to the store, and then when you come back, you still have to make it. So HelloFresh meals cuts that process in half. If you haven't tried it out, you've got to take advantage of it. Everybody is probably telling you about it, but seriously, it's one of those things that just makes life simpler, and that's all that we are all looking for, and it's great food as well, great and fresh food. So if you need to try it out, use my promo code, which is Brooke Cooks, and use the link down below. If you live in the US, you'll get 50% off with my code, but the code is valid internationally and you will still get a special discount. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2019 in Louisiana, and the police were called to a residence in Baton Rouge that June 2nd into the morning of June 3rd. Someone had allegedly been shot multiple times. Now, the 911 call was actually thought to be made by the killer, and when police arrived, they found a man lying in the hallway of the home in a puddle of blood. However, he was still breathing at this point. He appeared to be shot in the head and in the torso, and the victim was identified as Bert Tomplay, who was a 53-year-old man. Now, he was rushed to the hospital, which was Our Lady of the Lake Hospital, where his wife Susan was told of what was happening and met him there. Now, he was in critical condition in the trauma center on a ventilator, and meanwhile, police were questioning the 911 caller, who was thought to be the killer, when they arrived at the home. It turned out that this was Bert's son, who was 17-year-old Anthony Tomplay. Now, he openly confessed on the 911 call that he had killed his father, or he believed that he had. A young-sounding male voice had told the dispatcher that he needed somebody to come to the residence, told her where to send police after some confusion on the address of the home, which was quite strange, but his tone would later be described as a flat affect, while on this phone call showing very little emotion.
Emergency.
I just killed my dad. What do I need to tell you?
So you said you just killed your dad?
Yeah.
Okay, and what's the address?
I think it's 17886 Green Moss Avenue. Is there any way for you to tell me? I can go check if you want.
Well, I need to make sure that's the correct address. Okay, and is he still alive, or?
He might be, I don't know. I think I shot him like 3 times, I think.
You shot him 3 times?
I'm not sure how many times I hit him. I know there's blood on the floor, so I know he's at least been shot once.
Okay.
I shot 3 times at him. He's on the ground.
Okay, you shot him 3 times with a gun?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Or at least I tried to. He tried to attack me. And we got into a fist fight, and I ran in his room and locked the door and grabbed the gun. And I unlocked the door, and he tried to and then I shot him.
And are you there right now, or have you left?
No, I'm still here.
All right. And what's your name?
Anthony Joseph Tomplin.
Okay. And do you know exactly where you shot him at? The areas?
Yeah.
Where?
Excuse me?
Where?
The address I just gave you, I guess?
No. The different areas of his body.
I aimed for the head, but I might have hit him in the chest. I'm not quite sure. So the cops coming with someone?
Yes, I have an ambulance on the way.
All right. Are you certain that the cops are coming to the right address? Like, I'm not 100% if I give you the exact right address.
You're not sure if that's the right address? 17886 Gray Moss?
That sounds right.
Now, police searched the home and they found a revolver on the kitchen counter as well as a revolver on the master bedroom bed next to a cell phone. There was also a crack in the door of the master bedroom, and it appeared as though someone was trying to break it open or break it down. It was quite a significant crack in the door. However, the rest of the home was very clean. There was no sign of a struggle. Nothing really was broken or overturned. However, surveillance cameras were found outside of the home where you could see all of the areas surrounding the home, and when Bert's wife Susan was asked why there was these surveillance cameras, she said that Bert just wanted to protect the family and wanted to be able to see everything. Now, Anthony would be questioned and he would give the same exact story that he gave on the 911 phone call. He stated that he had actually not gotten along well with his father for quite a long time, that he didn't really like him because his father would call him bad names, and that night he had woken up around 3 a.m. to his father, who was drunk and going through his cell phone. Now, Anthony said that his father didn't find anything, but he was going through it because he believed that Anthony was talking to his wife, who he was separated with at the time, who was Susan. She was not in the home at the time, and so his father believed he was in contact with Susan and did not approve of this. Like I said, Bert and Susan were not together at this point. They were fighting, and Susan had left the home. And so Anthony said that once Bert looked through the phone and couldn't find any evidence, that he started screaming and trying to hit Anthony. And so Anthony ran into the master bedroom and closed the door on Bert and locked it. And he said that the screaming was escalating and he was trying to break down this door. So he ended up grabbing two of the guns that his father had and making sure that they were ready to go in case he needed to protect himself. He said he grabbed two because he was worried that one wouldn't work, but he said that Bert had asked him if he was going to shoot him, and he didn't say anything back to this. But after Bert was done trying to knock down the door and it was quiet on the other side, Anthony said that he opened the door and he was face to face with his father, Bert, and he shot 3 times. Now, Anthony was arrested and charged with attempted manslaughter of his own father, who was currently on life support at the hospital. However, after 4 days, on June 6th, he would succumb to his injuries. There was no improvement, and so he was actually taken off of life support. His cause of death was believed to be a gunshot wound to the head, and it was deemed a homicide. That's when this became a manslaughter case, because investigators revealed that Anthony hadn't just told them that he had shot his father 3 times, one right after another. He actually said Bert didn't have a gun, wasn't coming after him. He fell to the ground after the first shot and asked Anthony not to shoot again, and then he was trying to get away. But Anthony said he followed him while he was on the ground and he shot him 2 more times. When asked if there was an alternative way to get out of the house or to deal with the situation, Anthony did admit that there were windows in the bedroom that he could have gotten out of that were locked, but that he may have been able to escape from, but instead he chose to shoot his father. With this version of events, it sounded to investigators that this was an intentional murder instead of self-defense, so Anthony was then charged with second-degree murder. They feared that he wasn't showing any empathy about his father's death, and officers claimed that at the crime scene he wasn't crying or really showing any emotion at all. In fact, he was extremely compliant, and they found his behavior quite odd. He also wasn't able to tell them his address or the year that he was born, and he seemed to not have the knowledge about simple, common questions. With the media coverage, it was appearing to be a spoiled son who had killed his wealthy father for money. And that was kind of the narration around this whole case, but that didn't really seem to be the full truth. And Bert's wife, Susan, her brother claimed that he never saw any problems between Anthony and between Bert, that Anthony got anything he wanted and he was treated like a king. However, Susan's ex-husband, who had a kid with Susan, who was also living at the home when Susan was living there, came forward to say that his son had called him while he was living there and asked him to pick him up so he could live with his father because he could not deal with the mental abuse at the home by Bert. Though officers were said to be at the home several different times for complaints like this, and every single time Anthony was asked if he was being abused, and he would say no. However, it turned out that Bert Tomplay was not the victim here. You see, for the past 11 years, Anthony Tomplay had been a missing boy. His mother, Teresa Thompson, had been searching for him for over a decade after he had vanished from their home in Texas in 2008 when he was 5 years old. You see, after the murder of Bert Tomplay and Anthony being in custody, a DNA genealogy researcher named Shayna Landry had been trying to get in contact with his birth mother. That was something that the community where Anthony was raised had no idea who his birth mother was. And so basically, Anthony's co-worker had reached out to this researcher and said, "Can you please help us find his birth mother so that we can let her know what's happening," and all of that. And they just also had a very gut feeling that there was more to the story than just a random murder. So that is when this researcher found Anthony's sister, who was named Natasha, who lived in Texas, and decided to message her on Facebook. After that, this researcher took a call with Natasha as well as her mother, Teresa, and asked if they knew Anthony Tomplay. Teresa immediately asked if he was alive because she had no idea. Shayna, the researcher, told her, "Well, he's alive, but someone else isn't." Natasha revealed that she was Anthony's half-sister and that they actually called him AJ. And they didn't know if their brother was alive or dead until that phone call. She explained that her mother, Teresa, was with Bert for about 10 years. They met in a restaurant that Teresa had worked at. They hit it off, and Teresa's mother actually hated Bert from the very beginning, said that his smile was too big to be real. But at that time, he was making Teresa very happy, and so she stayed with him. However, it was when they moved to Houston that he was said to be very violent, and he was demanding all of the attention. He was doing drugs, and once she was left so badly beaten that she was in bed for a week. After Anthony was born, Bert still wouldn't stop the abuse and would actually hold the baby while he abused Teresa. When he was 7 months old, Bert would take him out in the car and not tell Teresa where he was going, and Teresa actually called 911. The police found him, but then let him go. And a little while later, he did return with Anthony, but he pretended like nothing happened. Bert then began to ask Teresa to get a life insurance policy for herself, and Teresa refused, believing that Bert was going to kill her for the money. And she started leaving notes around the house saying that if something happens to me, Bert did it. And one night, when Bert's friend showed up at the door when Bert wasn't home and told her that she needed to leave immediately because Bert had paid him to kill her. He said he wasn't going to do it, but that she had to get out now. Now, Teresa couldn't leave at that point. She was trying to find a way where she could take Anthony, that they would be safe. And so when Bert got there and she was still alive, he actually went to confront the man who didn't kill her. So thankfully she was okay at that point. But shortly after that, Bert was abusing her in front of his own parents, and they got really scared that something was going to happen to her and actually took her out of the home and drove her to a bus stop to go home to her own parents for a while. But when she came back to get Anthony a little while later, she found that everyone was gone, her husband and her son. When Anthony was only 5, he and Bert had vanished from their home, and she had no contact with them until Bert actually reached out and told her where they were. And so Teresa got there, and Bert wouldn't let her inside to see Anthony, even though she could hear him talking inside. She claimed that she started putting up missing persons posters in that neighborhood to let everybody know that Anthony was a missing child. And she finally got Anthony back. She got full custody of him. And that is when an officer would come to their door and tell them that Bert had filed paperwork for full custody. And so they were legally allowed to take Anthony. And that is exactly what they did. A court in Baton Rouge was said to give temporary custody to Bert after he simply stated that Teresa was crazy with no evidence. Teresa said that Anthony loved to plant things and play outside in the backyard before he was taken, and that she hoped as he got older he would get on the internet and she would be able to find him that way. And she even kept a missing poster of him in her purse for the past 11 years. Though there was no official missing persons report of Anthony in the National Crime Information Center, authorities had looked there and they found no case, but they did begin investigating this story when it was told to them after Anthony had murdered his father. So investigators decided to speak to his birth family, his mother, more to get the full story before deciding what to do next as far as Anthony's case. At this point, he was being held in custody with an $100,000 bond, and a grand jury had upgraded his sentence to second-degree murder, saying that he had an intent to kill. Although he was 17, he was sent to an adult detention center, and after 6 months in jail, his bail was reduced in order for him to be released and to get some counseling that he was said to desperately need. A psychologist stated that Anthony was harmless to society but needed to heal. He was being tracked with an ankle monitor at this point, and he had to come back to court every 30 days just to check in, and he was also released into the care of his stepmother. His stepmother and step-siblings claim that they will do anything to support him and to testify for him, and his lawyer was a man named Jarrett Ambo, and he claimed that Anthony had been isolated and regularly abused by his father Bert, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and that he had little contact with the outside world. He wasn't even in school, and that he is not guilty. He is a victim. But Anthony's birth mother's story was backed up when criminal records were found for Bert. You see, Bert was charged with assault 3 different times back in 2002, and these were found to be filed by Teresa Thompson, Anthony's biological mother. He did go to jail for short periods of time, including going to jail for 6 months for beating Teresa when she was pregnant. It was also found that Bert's current wife, Susan, had filed a restraining order against him just a few months prior to his death because she said that Bert was physically abusing her to the point where he knocked out one of her teeth. Neighbors said that he was always drunk and acting quite strange. Once the police were called to a neighbor's property because Bert was said to not be leaving their area, and many people didn't know much about him, and they did not see him, and they especially did not see his son, Anthony. Now, Anthony's half-sister, Natasha, said that she had a brave brother who was just defending himself for the last time against an evil man. But when Anthony spoke about the kidnapping that happened when he was 5 years old, he didn't remember much. He told investigators that his father had told him his mother was a drug addict and had abandoned him, and the only thing that he remembered about her was that she had blonde hair. He said he didn't know his mother's name or if he had grandparents at all. They didn't meet for the holidays or ever. He also said that his father put a tracker on him at all times, whether that was on his phone or whatever he was using, to make sure he knew where he was. But he was now facing a life sentence for second-degree murder of the person who had kidnapped him. Now, his lawyer actually held a mock trial to practice his defense, but also to be able to listen to what this mock jury had to say in deliberation to further strengthen his defense. And his lawyer spoke to the prosecutor, who was Dana Cummings, who had Anthony's sentence reduced from the second-degree murder charge to manslaughter due to it being determined that this was in self-defense of his abusive father. They basically came to this conclusion because he had no friends, he never went to the dentist or the doctor, and he never told anybody what was happening to him because he was being mentally, emotionally, physically abused for so many years and was scared of the repercussions. He also felt like no one could help him because he had seen cops come to his door many times and they had done nothing. For this, Anthony would be getting no time or up to 40 years, but he was taken out of his ankle monitor, and in 2021 he pled no contest to negligent homicide. He also told the judge he never had a formal education. In fact, he couldn't even say the last grade he completed. I mean, he was 5 when he was kidnapped, so chances are he had not had any schooling at all. He also explained that it got worse, the abuse, when Susan had left, and that Bert began to drink a case of beer a day, was getting more abusive, and then after Susan had filed this restraining order, she had posted it online telling the neighborhood what Bert had done, and Bert was also going through the fact that he lost his job. He was in debt, and Anthony said that he was very scared of him because he thought Bert was starting to crack. Anthony was then sentenced to only 5 years probation, but that was if he earns his GED, if he goes to counseling and holds a full-time job or is in school full-time, and if he does all of that, he is eligible for this sentence to be expunged from his record completely.
It's good. I'm very happy. It's the best thing that could happen. Keeps him out of jail, puts him on probation. It's not a crime of violence, and it's expungible at the end of his probationary period, and that's very important. When I saw this injustice, my thought was, absolutely no way should this kid be in jail. Well, that's the outcome we have. It may not be the thing we want, it may not be perfect, but this is an imperfect system. We try to find the best possible justice, and I think that we've got that here today.
And even the prosecutor, Dana Cummings, said that this was the best outcome because jail would just keep him from being able to be productive. But she also said that's why he has this 5-year probation, because if he's not doing the work being productive, then they will reevaluate.
This is his opportunity. I said second chances may be his first chance, but it's his best chance.
Bert Tomplay's obituary stated that he was killed in a tragic accident of domestic violence that ended very badly. Now, after Anthony was released on probation, he got in contact with his biological mother, Teresa, and his grandmother, Patricia, and actually went back to Texas to visit them for a little bit. And they reminded him how much they loved him. And although they said they would love a relationship with him, they know that it's not going to be a typical family relationship, a mother-son, and so they would just hope to be friends with him. But it is very hard. And it was found that this whole family has dealt with a cycle of generational trauma and domestic violence. The grandmother, Patricia, had married an abusive man who abused Teresa, and Teresa went on to have this relationship with Bert that was very abusive, and then her son was abused by him, and then her son killed him. Anthony's stepmother, Susan, came forward to say a little bit more about the truth when living with Bert, and she said that she lived with Bert, Anthony, and her own son for years, that Anthony was a funny child growing up. He didn't have a care in the world, but she did explain that when Bert was there, they kind of all got quiet. They all stopped joking, and they went to their rooms and didn't say much because they didn't want to make him angry. She also said she realized that there was no homeschooling being done, which was what Bert was saying that Anthony was doing, and so she started to teach him his name, his address, his phone number, but Bert still didn't want to send him to school. Susan's son said that he was very close with Anthony and that Anthony despised his father. And as they grew up, Susan said she began to get scared of Anthony too, because she said he didn't have much emotion. Now, Bert's best friend, who would come to the home occasionally, said that Anthony was always quiet, a good kid who kept to himself, and was always playing on a laptop. Now, in this documentary, Anthony did do some interviews after he had been sentenced and, while being on probation, and he said that when police arrived at his home that night, after he had called 911 because he had murdered his father, he didn't know what to do and what was going on or why he was being handcuffed at all. He thought he was only going to be in jail for a few days, and he felt like he didn't have a choice that night in murdering his father. And when he opened that door, he did admit to feeling nothing for his father, but said that he can feel for other people. Anthony also says he doesn't believe that he did anything wrong because he didn't want his father to kill him, and that was all. He believed that medics would come, save his father's life, and get him out of the house so he could forever be away from his father who stole his childhood away. He also stated he just wants to be happy and to move on. Now, Anthony would be about 20 or 21 years old today, about 2 years into his probation, but back in 2022, he did an interview with his lawyer, Garrett, and he just wanted to update the public on his life. They spoke about how after the Netflix documentary aired, it was a huge change in their life, and there was a GoFundMe set up for Anthony where he raised so much money, and he was saying that he was so thankful that everybody was being so generous, and that he was actually homeless for a while due to conflict with his stepmother.
We've had a lot of people reach out, a lot of people be very generous with their time, their effort, love, concern, care. I mean, it's been just overwhelming. And I know people wanted to hear from you, just how you were doing, how you were doing in life. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, and we're at almost like 90,000 on the GoFundMe. We're doing really good.
Which is crazy.
That's really crazy. That's a lot.
I mean, how does that make you feel that people cared enough to give you that kind of money? I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy to think because I know most of y'all don't even know me. Most of y'all are probably in different countries. I don't know why you would send so much to a person you don't even know, but I do really appreciate it.
He's since gotten a job at the grocery store deli. He's working on his GED. He's looking to buy a car.
I usually, I work in a deli, so like I cut people's meat and like fried chicken and stuff. That's what they have me do, just cook and clean and stuff.
And we kind of come up with a little plan. I mean, it's sort of a loose plan on what to do with all the money that you've received in the GoFundMe. I think we're going to spend some money on a car, right?
Yeah, the car.
And buy like a decent car, something that'll last you 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, something that'll not break down on you, something that won't cost you.
I'm thinking like a slightly pre-owned.
Like a slightly
vehicle.
Yeah, slightly pre-owned, good, well-made car,
Yeah.
Something that's reliable.
Good brand.
Yeah, that's right. And then, so we'll take a little bit of money to do that, and then we'll take a little bit of money and put it toward some tutoring, which I think we've talked about, right? Let's get some math tutoring specifically.
Get some math tutoring if I need the help on it. I got to get started and see how I'm doing in math because it's been a long time since I really focused on it.
What do you want to do for a living? What kind of person you want to be out there? How do you want to kind of present yourself to the universe?
Well, when I was younger, I always wanted money. But I couldn't ever figure out how to get it. I never wanted to be famous, but now I have money and fame, and I want to meet some other famous people, and I'm gonna start a bigger social media presence. I got a lot of options now that I didn't have before. I'm thinking about getting a gaming PC, maybe start streaming if I don't like that. I'm thinking about coming up with a clothing brand. Maybe I'll get into music one day. I got a lot of options.
In the interview, you can tell that his lawyer really has this father-son relationship with him. And then he said that his lawyer is the only one that he speaks to who he knew around that time. Anthony then introduced his girlfriend, Kayla, who he lives with and whose family treats him as their own.
A lot of people will experience Anthony from this TV show, but what's your everyday experience of Anthony? I mean, what's he like?
He's really sweet. He's just a normal person like everyone else. But he cries, he laughs, we have a good time a lot. Sometimes we go out like to the movies or to a party and all that, and it's always a fun time to be around him. Well, when we first got together, I didn't know much about his case. I saw that he had an ankle bracelet on, and I asked about it. He was like, I don't really want to talk about it. So eventually, I ended up Googling his name because, when you first start dating someone. And everything popped up, and the first thing I asked was, well, why? Because he isn't the type of person to just be like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and cause some havoc. So I asked him his side of the story, and he was very honest with me, and I was accepting of that. He wouldn't bother anyone. Even if someone provokes him, he wouldn't just go ahead and go at them with the same manner. He'd still stay chill and orderly. I asked him, well, why do you want to be in a relationship with me? What made you want to be with me? And he said, well, I wanted someone to love, and I wanted someone to love me. And that was a really big green flag for me, you know.
He seems to be doing great and has dreams for the future and really seems to have a positive but realistic outlook on life. His probation should come to an end around 2026, if not earlier, and so far it appears as though he has stayed out of trouble. I am sending him so much hope and happiness for the future, and I just hope that he can break those generational curses and heal. Do you believe that his sentence was appropriate? Was manslaughter the right charge? Should he have been in prison or on probation at all? It's quite crazy that without even knowing that he was a kidnapped boy, just knowing that he didn't have a good home life, he, escaped that situation. But because he didn't know at that time, that makes it a little harder to say it was definitely self-defense with so many years of that psychological abuse and Anthony living in fear. That moment might have felt like it was life or death to him anyways. So yeah, leave me your thoughts. So thank you for listening to Anthony Tomplay's story, and I really recommend the Netflix documentary if you get the chance to watch that as well. Use my promo code, which is Brooke Cooks, and use the link down below. But don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.